Hi, I'm Summer Williams. I'm an independent lived experience consultant. Much of my work experience was before I understood that I was disabled because I'm a late diagnosed autistic person. But my disability affected my employment, whether I knew about it or not. Uh, I became involved with APT in the spring of 2021 when I co delivered some of the disability and equality training sessions. And I now do work mostly in the third sector, and I feel very strongly about changing the narrative around disability and employment.
How does your disability affect you in the workplace?
So my neurodivergency, the autism, and the ADHD, kind of plays out in sensory sensitivities, communication differences, socialization differences as well. And then because I have chronic health conditions that fluctuate, they're not, so I have good days versus bad days. That has quite an impact, unfortunately, on my reliability. I used to pride myself on being an extremely reliable person, but the fibromyalgia has made it so that it kind of makes the calls on some days, not myself.
Um, you've said to me before in previous conversations that didn't, you weren't always aware of your disability. How has that affected, like being in the workplace, or has knowing about your disability made a difference?
Been massively made a difference. So I can look back through my work history and see why certain things played out the way they did, because I didn't understand myself, which meant that I couldn't work with my employers to support me because I didn't understand my own issues yet. And then as far as getting the diagnosis now and how it plays out, it means that I have a better understanding of myself. Not so much that they're my limitations, but I understand my parameters, if you know what I mean. And that means that puts me in a different place in conversations with my employers about how I can be the best employee that I can be, because I now understand that having accommodations and support means that I do my best work, my best job. Whereas before, I was one of those people. I'm an autistic person. I don't know if you've seen it before, but I had a lot of part-time, a lot of jobs. I have like 25 jobs on my CV. I do this for a little while, and then either I couldn't do it anymore, or I would move and go somewhere else and do something. So I didn't, and I never managed to stay in employment long enough and build up. You know how you can move through the ranks and things. None of that ever happened for me. And so I did a lot of work that wasn't really in my skill set. Like the last job I had before getting my diagnosis and getting signed off work and burnout, was that I was cleaning houses. And it's really common for autistic people to be underemployed. So I have two university degrees. I have two bachelor's degrees, but I was cleaning houses because a number of reasons. One, the accessibility of the application process is inaccessible to a lot of autistic people. I'm also not very good at selling myself or fudging. Like I see a lot of people, oh, I can do this with my CV, and it'll say, it'll highlight this kind of bit. Whereas I'm really quite literal. I'm like, I did this, 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 and this, and I don't know how to big it up to prompt myself, like seems to happen in the world out there. So I don't know how to sell myself, and so but what it means is I can have better conversations with my employer to get the best out of me.
Yeah. Are you currently in employment at the moment? Can you tell me a bit about those roles if you are? Or?
So I am in employment, but it's all self-employed at this point. So I don't actually have a boss. I have people that I work with, and that I do have to have conversations about accessibility and accommodations. But I've really kind of the work that I'm doing is in autism and disability education and advocacy. So, for example, one of the part-time positions, I'm working under the title currently as a lived experience consultant. That's kind of what I'm calling myself. And so one of the main jobs that I'm doing right now is I work with a local organization called the Action Group. And I started as a volunteer with them, but as I moved forward in time and they saw my value, they actually are now paying me for my work. But it started out, and what I do is I help keep the autism training, their in-house autism training. I help keep it up to date with where we are in autism affirming kind of information. And then I also co-deliver training with their in-house L&D, learning and development person. And I'm really quite fortunate in that situation because it's an organization that supports disabled people, but it's also an organization that has a lot of neurodivergent and disabled people as well. So they kind of really try to, they're quite eager to meet me in the accommodations discussions kind of thing. So it's not been, I know that sometimes with employers it can be a bit of a fight to get the accommodations that you need, but that's not the case with the Action Group.
So you found the self-employed route a bit easier than being an employee?
At this point, yes. It also works better with me because when I'm self-employed, I have more control over my schedule and stuff, more flexibility. So say if I was having a bad day, but I felt better in the evening, I can do whatever I need to be doing then, kind of thing. So it gives me a bit more independence and flexibility in what I do.
I think that leads quite nicely into the next question, or maybe you've already answered it. But can you tell me how your disability has impacted positively and or negatively, or is there anything you want to add from what you've just said?
I might just expand on a few things I said. So I talked about that application process being particularly difficult and quite inaccessible for autistic people. And that's starting from, from where they advertise their employment all the way up to that interview process. I'm a person who really struggles with forms and big open-ended questions. And so applications can be quite daunting for me. I now have an employment advisor who helps me through those difficult bits. But before I knew I was disabled, I didn't have that assistance. And so there were many jobs that I know I was perfectly capable of doing, but I wouldn't even, the application itself would put me off. The same thing with, I'm going to tell on myself a little bit here. So CVs, I am completely demand avoidant when it comes to CVs. And until 2021, I hadn't actually done an up-to-date CV in 20 years. So I'd only applied for jobs that didn't require a CV because once again, I had lots of jobs for 6 months or a year here. And then I had a lot of gaps in my employment history that I wasn't sure how to convey in a way that a future employer might understand, and that kind of thing. And then in the interview process, unlike here, where you've given me the questions, so I at least was able to kind of, these were all open-ended questions that you gave me. And often as an autistic person, I get a lot of anxiety with that. And I find it really difficult to pull the information from my head. And what that means in a lot of times is that I say the first thing that comes to mind. It's not necessarily the best answer. And so I'm not always, once again, I'm not selling myself properly in that interview process because I'm just saying things rather than the things I know that would best answer the question, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then as far as kind of that's about getting into a job. And then as far as retaining work, it's things like workplace culture and that social world that exists within companies and things that, once again, as an autistic person with anxiety and stuff, I don't necessarily just slot right in. I'm not great at the small talk and stuff. So often I can be too quiet, kind of thing. So I don't know how to form those social connections. I'm often not wanting to go out for the work drinks on a Friday night or something like that, because that kind of social situation isn't ideal for me and ends up being ends up being more stressful than fun in the end as an autistic person. I think I should probably mention that masking, autistic masking, I'm not sure if employers will be familiar with it, but so I'll explain it just briefly before I talk about it. Is autistic masking is when autistic people consciously present themselves as non-autistic in order to either protect themselves or to try to fit in a social situation. But unfortunately, that masking comes at a cost, which means that I'm not being my authentic self. And also, particularly in social situations, the mask usually isn't good enough, and I still end up seeming a bit weird, even though I'm trying to pretend that I'm not. And then in regards to my physical conditions, I can give the example of my last job. I was cleaning houses, and my physical and mental health were really at a crisis point. I was not managing, and I was starting to miss a lot of work due to, particularly, my anxiety was so high that the IBS was just, I wasn't able to get out of the house and get to work, kind of thing. And so I was missing a lot of work, and being self-employed, that then meant that I was not earning money. And as a self-employed cleaner, I was living kind of month to month kind of thing. And so I didn't have any stability, I didn't have any backups. But the only reason I was able to have been missing as much work as I was is because I was probably missing a day a week. But because I had different clients, like on a Friday than I did on a Monday, I was missing different weeks. But if I'd been in a 9-to-5 job, I would have been fired long before that for the amount of work that I had started missing.
And from what you said, that's a learning experience for me as well, with what you said about open-ended questions. I hadn't realised that, so it's definitely something I'll take on board going forward as well. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's great to share the knowledge, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. The next question is about can you give me examples of good practice from your employer supporting you in the workplace?
Yeah. So I'm going to kind of use the examples from the work that I'm currently doing. Even though it's self-employed, I still need accommodations when working with different organizations, and that's things like, as an autistic person, having clear written instructions with set deadlines and things goes a long way for me. Being able to work remotely, where I have access by working from home, I have I have the ability to have greater control over my sensory environment. So I'm not sitting in an office where phones are ringing and conversations are going on around me and stuff. But I've even talked, I was in an in-person training last week, and the co-trainer was it was the first time we'd done in-person training. So she, without being patronizing, she would check in with me. Like in the beginning, we made sure that I was okay and everything. In the middle, she checked in on me. And at the end, gave me some time to kind of debrief and, talk about the situation and stuff. All of those things are little things, but because she was able to do it in a respectful manner, I knew that if I were having struggles, I could have honestly talked to her about them, and she would have helped accommodate me in that situation.
Yeah, that's so important. And sometimes it's the littlest things that make the biggest difference.
And it's having that ongoing conversation, leaving it open as well, to know that whatever accommodations an employer is giving to an employee, that's not it, hard and set, we're done. That we need to reopen those conversations and check in now and again just to make sure that, I'm still feeling supported.
Yeah, because every day is different, and every situation and every session you deliver is different. So yeah, of course. That again leads quite nicely into the next question, which is how should good practices be implemented in policy making in the workplace?
So I think that the two things that I kind of went with was that employers need to be engaging both with the broader disabled community about how to properly support and accommodate disabled employees. And they can get some general ideas about things like, oh God, there's a government program, I've just forgot it. The program where employers can apply for money for accommodations and stuff.
Access to work.
Access to work. So, they need to familiarize with themselves with those kinds of topics, but then they also, once again, they need to be having those individual conversations with each of their disabled employees about what specific accommodations that individual needs, because there's not like a one-size-fits-all approach to supporting a disabled individual, where every single one of us are going to have unique needs. And so, but then how to get that into practice, how they actually get that into policy, I'm not so good on that front. But they need to be having these as regular conversations with management and things, it's not just like a manager is talking to an employee. The manager needs to be having conversations with their manager and so on, yeah. and so forth.
Of course, yeah. The next question, I'm not sure if you have any experience of this, but it's more supported employment. What do you think supported employment programs could be doing better?
So one is, I've noticed that not all, once again, I'm going to speak in generalities here because, but sometimes they're not so great at matching skill sets up with the actual employment. They just think about getting a disabled person into a job, not whether or not it's the best fit for them. Yeah. And matching that skill set to the individual job will lead both to better retainability in employment, but it's also going to give more back to that disabled person. Like I told you that I do work through the action group, but I also I'm also supported through them through the action group Real Jobs, through a program called Into Work. So I have an employment advisor, and she's been very, very good about learning about me and what my skill set are. And she can see the passion that I have for the education and advocacy work. And so she's doing everything possible to get me more and more of that kind of work, rather, because we could have me in a job at McDonald's yesterday kind of thing, but that's not what we're wanting to do. We're wanting something that I can take all of this passion inside me and use it. And so if we could do that. And then the other one is that I noticed that a lot of the support programs, they fall off after a while. So they get the person into employment and they're there for a couple of months, but then the support ends. So they don't have anybody helping them retain the employment. So being able to have longer, even indefinite support through employment, so that disabled person always has somebody to come back to say, because I know that if I'm having problems advocating for myself, I can go to Patricia, my employment advisor, and we can talk about what I need to do. And she will even come with me, to talk to my employer or whatever, if need be. And those kinds of things I think would be really good for once again, for keeping people in employment.
Yeah, that's some really good points to take forward, definitely. How does being a disabled person in employment impact on your well-being?
Well, it's, as a disabled person, it sometimes will take me more time, or I will use more energy than an abled person to get said task done kind of thing. And I'm not saying that because I feel like I'm doing more work or anything, but that has an impact on me personally. I use a lot of energy sometimes to get the things done. And also I have generalized anxiety disorder, so there's a lot of anxiety that permeates through my life just in general. But like the things I worry about in regards to work is whether or not I'm seen as good enough, whether my work is on par with a non-disabled person. I know I'm not supposed to think that way, but internalized ableism and stuff exists, and goes back to whether or not I'm truly being valued as an employee, or as you said, if I'm just that token member of staff, so they can say, tick, we've got our disabled person. But the big thing is I constantly worry about my health impacting my my responsibility, my reliability, and those kinds of things. So I worry, I get up every morning and worry, am I going to be able to do the things I need to do today? And that's not actually something an employer can help with. That's, that's just an ongoing worry with myself.
What about like your well-being as like you as a person? So does being employed, for instance, make you feel valued?
Oh, yes. So it goes back to that passion thing. So it makes me feel wonderful to do the work. Like, particularly, I love doing the autism training that I do for support workers, because, we have 6 support workers on the training day that day. And I can see that they're going to go out into their practice the next day, and things that we've taught them that day are going to make real life changes for people, improve people's lives, like in reality. And that fills me with all of the good stuff, so it does. And I mean, I must say, I take pride in the work that I do. I think that I've, after many, many, many years, I'm 45 now, I feel like I've finally found that niche where I can take my skills and my knowledge and do something with it. And so I'm proud of that. And it brings me a lot of joy to know that I'm helping other disabled people.
That's great to hear, and it's also great for employers to hear as well from that side of things. Can I ask about what key things you think you've learned about yourself as part of your employment journey to date?
So I really struggled with this one. It took me a minute. I had to stop and really, Alexa, stop. Sorry about that.
Okay, I have a similar problem.
So I had to really stop and think about it. And so what I realized is that to succeed and maintain employment, I need the accommodations, like I talked about earlier. Before my diagnosis, I pushed through as best I could, but that wasn't really working because I didn't get to the point that I am. I've only gotten to the point to being able to do the work I'm doing now because I had support. I didn't manage that on my own before. But the other thing is I'm not actually physically and mentally at a place where I can push through like I used to. Like I used to just be able, didn't matter how tired I was or how much pain I was in, I could just go ahead and do. But I can't. My body, like I said, makes calls now. And so those accommodations, they allow me the flexibility and, the support to do the best job I can and to actually do the work that I want to be doing and that gives something back to the world. And I'm not saying that cleaning houses didn't do good things, but I feel so much more of the good stuff doing this work.
Of course, because it's something you feel passionate about and believe in, and something you experience yourself and can make a difference in.
And we've just got a whole lot of work to do. So we need all of us out here.
Yeah. We need to be a tribe.
Exactly. Yep.
So that brings me to the last question, which is, what tips would you give to employers as a disabled person with regards to employing and retaining a diverse workforce?
So I'm going to go back to, so I'm going to start with that application process again, because I think we live in a world of a very antiquated hiring process. I really do. This advertise the job and then do this interview where really whoever can come in and put on the best show kind of wins. And autistic people in particular, but I think a lot of disabled people, maybe that interview process is not where they necessarily shine, where they have the skills and the abilities, but can't sell themselves in that way. So even looking at alternatives to that interview process, there's some jobs where you could do a 1 day where they come in and on the job kind of training and see how they pick up, see if they're, I think we need to start thinking out of the box and hiring people. And I don't necessarily have all of the answers, but I know that there's got to be other ways that we can be doing things, because it's, yeah. Yeah. I kind of lost my thought there, so I'm just going to move on to the next one. And that's, once again, that once you have hired that disabled employee, that you keep, I'm going to mention again, you keep that conversation open and ongoing, where you want to create an atmosphere with your disabled employee where they're comfortable and confident. They're not scared to come and talk to you, and that you're not uncomfortable asking them how they're doing in employment and if there's other ways that you could help them. And I know that if you've not had these kinds of conversations before, they might seem awkward at first, but I think moving forward, as you develop a relationship with your employee, you can make those conversations accessible from both sides, that you're both comfortable to be having those kinds of talks.
Yeah, that's great. Is there anything else you want to add before we finish?
I just got one more tip real quick. And it's that when you start accommodating disabled people in the workplace, you often find that some of those changes you make actually help lots of people in the employment, not just your disabled people. And so because you can often get caught up, oh, we're just doing this for this one person, but see how that can apply across the board, kind of thing.
Yeah. So if they're making it inclusive for you, for example, then they're making it inclusive for everybody.
And I don't think employers realize that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I don't think they always do realize that, and hopefully that will be something they can take away from hearing your experiences. So thanks for that.
That would be one of the most important things I think I would want them to take away, because that applies across the board.